Hi, okay kids, hope you're all well, hope you're okay, and hope this lesson is useful for you today. Can you think of a time when you needed help with something? Can you think of a time when you needed help with maybe some work at school? Or maybe you saw your parents doing some DIY and some work at home and they needed help with something? Or maybe something more serious. Have a look at this video. Maybe you've seen people needing help like this. So in today's lesson, we're seeing how God rescued his people. They needed help. They didn't need help with maths, they didn't need help with DIY, and they didn't even need rescuing from the water, but they needed help. And we'll see how God rescued his people. God rescued his people then, and God will rescue his people today. The story is from the book of Judges, true story from the Old Testament, from the book of Judges, and the chapter begins with the Israelites planting crops, planting food. And what happens next is really sad. It's really bad, because their enemies come and they come into the land and they destroy all the crops, and then they go again. They destroy all the crops. Now what happens if your crops are destroyed? Why did the Israelites want to plant the crops? They wanted them to grow, and they wanted them to be able to use to make food and to eat them. So when their enemies came and destroyed all the crops, the Israelites had no food. And also, what was bad, what was worse, was when their enemies came, they didn't just destroy the crops, so the Israelites had no food. They also destroyed the sheep, they killed the cattle, they killed their donkeys. So the Israelites couldn't get their wool, they couldn't make clothes, they couldn't keep warm, they couldn't get milk to drink, they couldn't use their animals to help carry heavy loads, and they couldn't even kill the animals for meat. So they had no help, no warmth, no food. They were in a really desperate situation. And their enemies even made them leave their homes. When they came and invaded the land, their enemies even made the Israelites leave their homes and go and shelter in caves in a mountainside. So things were really, really bad. No food, no animals, not their own home. And do you know how long the Israelites have been in this situation for? 7 years. Some of you probably can't even remember 7 years ago. It's a long time, isn't it? 7 years. They had no food, no animals, no home, and they were in a really desperate situation with their enemies coming into the land and making life really, really hard. There's 2 important questions to ask, 2 important questions to answer next, that we can understand why the Israelites were in this situation and what they did. What happened next? So first of all, why? Why were the Israelites in this situation? Why did they have 7 years of this hardship, 7 years of their enemies coming into the land and making life so tough for them? It's because they stopped worshipping God. They stopped worshipping the one true God, and they were in a cycle of sin and disobeying God, and then God teaching them a lesson and punishing them so that they would learn that they needed to depend on him, and then they would repent, ask God to forgive them, and they would come back to God again. And that cycle, that circle, went round and round, and at the moment they were in the cycle, part of the cycle, where they were being taught a lesson by God that they needed to depend on him, and they needed to look to him and him alone, and not to look to other false gods of the nations that surrounded them. So that was why God was teaching them that they needed to depend on him and that they couldn't look to false gods. So what did they do? They cried out to God. They cried out to the Lord, because the situation that they were in was so awful. They knew they could not save themselves. They cried out to the Lord for help. And you know what? The Lord answered their prayer. The Lord is kind, the Lord is merciful, and he hears the prayers of his people when they come to him. And he did 2 things. He sent a prophet, he sent a messenger to the people, and he called one of their people to be the leader who would save them from the enemies and make them free. So God sent a prophet, God sent a messenger to the people. And this is the message that God gave to his prophet to give to the people. So the messenger said to the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I rescued you from Egypt. I saved you. I brought you from that land of slavery, and I gave you into a new land, brought you into a new land which you can call your own. And I gave you all these good things. And look at all the good that I've done for you. I've shown you that you can trust me. I've shown you that I want the best for you. And now I want you to listen to me. I want you to trust me again. Know that I want the best for you. And do what I say instead of doing your own thing." And the Lord knew that the Israelites needed to be reminded of his words. The Lord knew that the Israelites needed to be reminded of his goodness to them. And so he sent them a prophet. Now, the second thing that God did was to call a leader, to call one of the people from the Israelites to be the leader of the Israelites, to lead his people out from slavery and to get the land free from their enemies. And you may think that the person that God calls to be the leader would be a superhero type of person, someone that is strong and brave and everyone looks to as a great leader, and someone that everyone follows. But God doesn't always do things in the way that we expect. God always knows what's best, but he doesn't always do things in the way that we expect. And the person that God chose for this important task was from an unimportant family, and he was the weakest person in that family and the least important man in that family. And his name was Gideon. His name was Gideon. And God came to Gideon when he was looking after his wheat. He had a small amount of crops, and he was trying to keep them from being taken by the enemies. He was trampling them down in a place which was usually where they trampled grapes. He was trying to hide them so the enemies wouldn't come and take his crops. And he was working away, and then one day he looked up and he saw a man sitting by an oak tree. And this person was very special. This person was the angel of the Lord. He was Jesus himself, who had come to speak to Gideon. And the angel of the Lord was sitting under the oak tree, and he said to Gideon something astonishing. He said to Gideon, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. I am sending you to lead Israel to safety from your enemies." Isn't that amazing? You'd be amazed. And to say that Gideon was amazed would be an understatement. He sat there, you can imagine him. And he said back to the angel of the Lord, he said, "But if the Lord is with us, why are all these bad things happening? If the Lord is with us, why are our enemies trampling over the land, taking our crops, killing our animals, driving us from our homes for 7 years? Why are all these bad things happening to us? I'm so weak and my family is so weak. How can you choose me to lead the people and beat our enemies?" And the Lord was very wise, and the Lord was very kind in the way that he answered Gideon. And he knew that Gideon needed reassurance. He didn't tell him off for not trusting him. He didn't say, "Gideon, I've told you to do something, go and do it. Why are you even questioning me?" He knew that Gideon needed reassurance. And what's the best reassurance that the Lord can give to us? His presence. And he reminded Gideon, he said to Gideon, "I will be with you, and you will beat all of your enemies." Isn't that wonderful? The Lord said to Gideon, "I will be with you, and you will beat all of your enemies." And to hear that is just what Gideon needed. But Gideon wants to be really sure. He wants to be completely certain that he's doing the right thing. So he's talking to God himself. He understands that he's talking to the Lord, and he says, please can I just have one more sign? Can I just have a sign that you really, really do truly want me, even though I'm so weak, you do really, really truly want me to lead the people and beat our enemies? And the Lord is so patient. He's really, really patient, and he agrees to give Gideon the sign that he requests. And so Gideon goes off and he gets some meat and he gets some bread and he gets some gravy, and he brings that back to the Lord. And then the Lord says, "Put the meat over there and the bread over there and put the gravy over there." And Gideon does what he's told. And then the Lord takes his staff and he takes his rod, his stick, and he touches the meat and the bread, the place where the meat and the bread were, and fire comes up. And when the fire comes up, Gideon knows that that is the sign that he's asked for, and that is the sign that the Lord really, really does want him to be the man who is leading Israel and going to free the land from the enemies. And the Lord reassured Gideon again and said, "Peace, do not be afraid." Isn't that wonderful? Peace, do not be afraid. When all the enemies were around and when the land was in such turmoil and when everyone was so afraid, the Lord said to Gideon, "Peace, do not be afraid." And so Gideon built an altar and he put the stones on top of each other, and that was a special place where Gideon used to help him worship God, and he called it the Lord is Peace. He called it the Lord is Peace. Now, do you remember the two important questions that we asked earlier when we looked at the situation that the Israelites were in? Why and what? So we need to ask them again now to understand how to apply this lesson of God calling Gideon to us today. So first of all, why? Why do we need help? So we learned why the Israelites needed help, and it's not too dissimilar for us. Why do we need help today? We don't necessarily have enemies taking our land and our food and our animals in the same way, but we do still find ourselves in a similar situation of sinning against God. We need help because we've sinned against God and we're not listening to him, we're not trusting him as he told us to. And so we need God's help. We've rebelled against him and we're not putting him first in our lives. And what should we do? What's the right thing to do? Just what the Israelites did. We need to cry out to the Lord for help. Cry out to God and say, "God, please save me." And God will answer our prayer. If we call out to the Lord and say, "Please save me. I have sinned and I need forgiveness. I need your help. I need to trust in you," then he will hear our prayer and he will answer our prayer. And as you know, Jesus took the punishment for our sin when he died on the cross. Jesus took the punishment that we deserve, and we need to trust in him and ask God to forgive us because Jesus died. So, just as God chose Gideon to help rescue his people who are being punished for their sin, in the same way God chose Jesus to help rescue us and to save us when we've sinned against him and we deserve to be punished, but we can trust in him and he will save us. Isn't that wonderful? So God could be trusted all those years ago. God could be trusted to help his people, and he called the leader Gideon to save his people and lead his people through the bad situation that they're in. And in the same way, God can be trusted today. We've sinned against him, and God's called Jesus, who died and rose again, so that if we trust in him, then we can be saved from the terrible situation of sin that we're in. Isn't that wonderful? And so think about that. I hope that's helpful. I hope you'll remember the lesson, and hope you have a good week, and hope to see you soon. Bye.